I weather maps, very colorful today. We have a heat warning in effect. There's a severe thunderstorm watch in effect, and it's just been so busy, and we've seen some extreme weather events even in just the last week. Parts of Montreal flooded last week. We got more than 100 millimeters of rain. Just this afternoon in Toronto and Ontario, major flooding in some parts of the city there. 97 millimeters of rain fell in only 3 hours. And some climate experts say it is time for climate forecasts, not only weather forecasts. Some climate scientists are asking for more tools that can show how climate change will impact our daily weather conditions. And this comes after Environment and Climate Change Canada just released a new tool that forecasts and tries to make direct links with human-caused climate change. Will a tool like that get us to change our behavior? Let's ask Djordje Romanic, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences at McGill University, and he joins us now in studio. Djordje, good afternoon. Thanks for coming in.
Good afternoon, Sabrina.
What would a climate forecast sound like, for example? How is that different than the weather forecast we're used to?
So, weather forecast is usually a few days in advance, and we get precise information about variables such as temperature, wind, pressure, and so on. So you know 2 days from now, even 2 days from now, what the weather will be like.
Yeah.
Climate forecasts are profoundly different. You don't get forecast what the weather will be on 28 June 2028. You get general trends. Temperature or precipitation or some other meteorological variable will have a trend of increase or decrease, or it will be the same as some reference value. And reference value is usually 30 years average.
And so we do see where, for example, Environment Canada a few times a year will put out a summer forecast or a fall forecast. Well, what's your take on that? Are those detailed enough?
They are most certainly detailed enough, but they will never be as detailed as weather forecast. Because as the prognostic period is increasing, uncertainty is also increasing. So also methodology to calculate, and I emphasize calculate, nobody is predicting based on their mood. Methodology to calculate climate forecast is profoundly different or substantially different than methodology to calculate weather forecast. So when you see seasonal forecast, you should never trust it to the extent to which you trust 1, 2, 3 day weather forecast.
Right. And in highlighting trends and getting more familiar with that, how do you think that would change people's outlook or people's perception on what we experience?
Yeah, so generally, most climate forecasts suggest that we will have trends of increasing temperatures in some regions, increased precipitation, not in all regions. So from the point of view of individual, I believe there is not much to do. From the point of view, because it's very important to distinguish you and I as individuals, what we can do, and governments and decision makers. From the point of view of decision makers, there is probably a lot to be done. And then that can cascade to individuals, but it's not up to us really to adapt that much. It's more for decision makers to take into account measurements, number one, and then number two, projections, which are the best we have at this moment, and then to propose the right way forward.
Djordje, in your work, working in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences, a tool like what Environment Canada and Climate Change Canada has just recently put out in the last couple of weeks, a tool that looks at extreme weather events. It looked at that heat wave where we had Humidex values over 40 back in June, and tries to link that to human-caused climate change. How does a tool like that help you in your work?
Well, in my work, I don't use it that much, okay? Because if there is let me just give a small background if possible. If there is extreme weather event, since we know about climate change, there is always, you don't have to be expert, you ask question, if is this particular event consequence of human-induced climate change or it would happen even if there was no humans on this planet? That's very old question, very simple, but extremely, extremely complicated to answer. And people are trying to answer it, but the climate system is so complicated that although we know question, we cannot give precise answer.
It's very complex. There are many layers and factors.
Exactly.
Ocean temperatures,
Exactly.
winds, jet stream.
Because climate is atmosphere, land, oceans, as well as external factors such as solar activity, volcanic activities, and so on. So, giving definite answer to a question, is particular heat wave or thunderstorm or cold spell or something like that consequence of human-induced climate change, is still very, very uncertain. When somebody or some tool reports or tells you, oh, this particular event is due to human-induced climate change, you should take it with a grain of salt, because methodologies are still not at the level to be reliable that we can make such claims. So I applaud that tool that was released, and it's honestly, it says it's pilot tool, so it will be improved.
It's a pilot project, yeah.
Exactly. So I applaud it a lot, but I think what it needs to be added is clear methodology how they provide these statements. Now there is a link to methodology, but when you go to that link, there are 5 different options of methodologies that people describe, so we don't know which one exactly, they used. And second, to provide some source of uncertainty of their claim.
And we did reach out to Environment and Climate Change Canada, and as you mentioned, it says it does provide methodology. It's publicly available online. You mentioned, Djordje, decision makers. You mentioned the policy makers. What is it that you would like to see from governments so that, a day like today, heat warning, severe thunderstorm watch, we had flooding just in the last week, major flooding in some parts of Montreal, expressways were closed, which we haven't seen in a while. What do you want to see from policymakers?
So I want to start by saying that I think Canada is doing much more than many other countries around the world. I travel a lot, and just in news I see that in Canada this topic is covered much, much more than in many other developed countries. So I think from the point of view of awareness of people and media, I think we're doing quite well. What I would like to see government and policymakers to do is, let me say this, to do something, but something that will not affect people that work from 9 to 5. Because I don't think it's realistic to expect that somebody who works 9 to 5 can change their lifestyle to accommodate climate change, global warming, and so.
Are you talking about getting people out of their cars?
So this is a common question, right? So what I tell people, if you want to buy a car and you saved money for 5 years, you should buy that car. You should buy that car. Because, and it's internal combustion, you should buy that car, enjoy your life. But if you don't need 5 cars, don't buy 5 cars, have 1 car. If you leave the room, turn off the light. That's what we can do as individuals. You don't need to have 5 air conditioners. Maybe you need 1. When you leave the room, I came here by Uber. Now you take this Uber driver, or you know what? Now you have to spend extra $30,000 to buy electric car. Is that fair? When policy can be tailored more towards industry, which by the way contributes much more than the individuals like you and I. So that's what I think. Government should more focus on industry rather than individual people.
What about a move like, for example, the Quebec government saying by 2035, no more new gas-powered vehicles, those will be phased out, and it's, moving to brand new fleets would be fully electric by that point. Is that not a government decision that is kind of changing and looking at industry?
Yes, but it's also perhaps affecting individual people. Now, I am all for that decision. I think it's excellent, as long as people that actually go and buy a car don't need to spend more money. Or if they need to spend more money, then they should have a higher salary that accordingly reflects that. Because yes, that affects industry, of course. There will be more production of electric vehicles and so on. So that's a good move, but at the end of the day, it will also affect regular people. Now, I don't have anything against affecting regular people if they can afford it without now going extra. But that's quite often not the case. And this is where I see, a little bit of conflict between regulations and normal life.
Yeah. Do you feel we're at that point, Djordje, where we're at that cusp of, the UN, for example, the IRCC report saying the time is now, we need to make changes now. Are we at that point where we have to really look at our lifestyles and governments have to look at policy, and are we on the cusp of transforming what we know?
Well, the popular answer is yes. But I don't know. I think we are not at that point. Let's put it like that. I think there is no need to introduce yet another issue in everyday life. Because people have so many issues, you want to get a loan from bank, you want to have family and so on. So there is no need to introduce yet another climate change issue into everyday life. If you go to school, you are a high school student, you go to school tomorrow, it's not affected by climate change, okay? If you want to go to vacation, it's not affected by climate change. Or, let me put it this way, maybe it is. But that effect is substantially small compared to many, many other effects that you will encounter to your way to school or to your way to vacation.
The individual lifestyle versus the world. Djordje Romanic, thank you so much for your thoughts on this today, and more to come on these tools as Environment Canada launching this pilot project. Djordje Romanic, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Assistant Professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences at McGill University.